In this episode, I briefly elaborate on my theory of the obstacle failure and retry loop that I believe is the foundation for all satiating wins. Beginning by exploring what a satisfying win is, then quickly analyzing an example of such an experience, after which I briefly expand on the idea of the loop itself before exploring it part by part, which consists of the introduction of a challenge, failure of the player, and their reattempts that should finally lead to mastery and satisfaction. No matter if it's a board game or video, or even physical, the goal of all games is to win, one way or another. It could be surviving last in a battle royale, or making it through all the levels and narrative experience of a video game to finally witness the climax. Winning and failing are the basis of all games, but allow me to further elaborate on those specific winning experiences that are so much more satiating and dramatic than your usual level complete notifiers. The experience of such a win can be so energetic and desiring that it puts the players on the edge of their seats while it keeps building up the anticipation for that final satisfaction that not only marks the player's progress onto the next level, but is a proclamation of the player's increased mastery and skill growth. But before we get to the inner workings of what makes a win so much more fun, to understand it better, I want to take you through the gameplay experience that drew my attention to it in the first place. As you just start getting comfortable in the driver's seat, one of the early campaign missions in Heat is a single lap sprint named Get Noticed. And the requirement to pass the mission is you have to finish first. Now this is exactly how my experience went down. The race began pretty decently as I made my way through these empty but relaxing streets of Palm City together with the other three opponents. I even managed to take the lead, but damn you, Daryl. As I built up my momentum again, drifting along the curves and having fun, the race was also nearing the end, but I was positive I could still finish first, until I discovered this part of the course. With 3/4 of this single lap sprint already covered, if I mess up now, I mess up real good. And guess what? I messed up. Having broken my momentum put me out of my flow, and the thought of cars behind catching up and racing past occupied my head that made me miscalculate another turn. And so I restarted the race. My second run began even better and was even more fun. I maintained the lead position for majority of the race, but the thought of trying to not mess up again was clouding up, and the desperation to make the final win was building just as fast. And maybe both combined and a distracted mind led me to the same mess up. Twice. With the mission failed and the desperation to win intensifying as much as the fear of messing up again, this simple video game race turned into an adrenaline-filled challenge of proving my actual ability and skill. So a restart it was. And before you judge me, no, I am not always this bad. Third time's a charm, and so my third run was the best. With the most fun drifts and jolting near misses, I was flowing like a breeze. But the obstacle of doom was approaching too. That made me tense a little, but I let my mind free. Breaking a little early and barely making it, but I did. That was a relief, but there still was another obstacle to pass. Flying my way to the next sharp turn, I was feeling both like a badass and a novice who could still mess up, and I wanted to score the win badly this time. An early reflex again, sliding inches away from a mess up, but making it. And right when I thought it's all downhill from here, Daryl flies by. I was at the peak of my euphoria when I realized I lost the race again to early reflexes. Less than 500 meters to go when suddenly I start to catch up on Daryl's car. The finish line is in sight and I fly by, snatching the win from the opponent AI and finally scoring that win. I cannot express how energetic and fulfilling this experience was. This is the experience we play for. And this, I think you'd agree, is what I call a satisfying win. So what is it that makes it so? What is it that orchestrates this whole experience of a more dramatic and emotion-fueled win? Well, what my research tells me, it's the OFR loop. The Obstacle-Failure-Retry Loop is my theory of what I have come to conclude of the state that all challenges leading to a satisfying win put the players into before the players grow in skill and break the loop. Think of gameplay moments when you're not able to clear a level or a particular challenge, maybe for the lack of a skill or a smarter strategy, and have to try multiple times before you finally make it through. It is in this state that the players escalate the worth and value of the pending win, whilst being expected to go through a learning curve, improve and master the obstacle, whatever that may be that's keeping them inside the loop. To explain with a quick example, the obstacle in my gameplay experience of Heat was this alley, the 2 sharp turns in it to be specific. Messing it up and failing the race was the second part of the loop. That was followed by a retrial because the level was not cleared. Completing a full circle, I was brought right back to the first part of the loop when I had to face the same obstacle again in my second playthrough. Failing again followed by another retrial completed another cycle of the loop, still keeping me inside and back to the obstacle again. It was on this attempt that I passed the challenge and the loop was broken because the obstacle was mastered. So it is this loop and the final escape out of it that curates an experience pretty different from a direct, non-dramatic win. If you don't fully understand it for now, don't worry. Just don't discard the idea yet. For now, let's not rush and explore the mechanics of this loop part by part. All experiences that lead to a satiating win begin with the introduction of an obstacle. One that challenges the player's current skill level and forces them to undergo a learning curve of skill mastery. For example, before I could experience this win exactly as I described it, the build-up to it was set into motion by the introduction of the sharp alley. That became an emergent obstacle for me when I couldn't clear it based on my hitherto skill of handling the virtual car. Had it not become a challenge to my skill, swiftly making past it, maintaining a lead meters ahead of the tailing AI racers, and finishing first in the first playthrough wouldn't have been so much of a dramatic and nail-biting win. A challenge is what, after all, makes an experience fun, or even life for that matter. It is the transformation to mastery led through a learning curve that gives the players a sense of growth and makes an experience good enough to spend time in. Because mastering a challenge feels good. And it feels good because fun is all about our brains feeling good because of the release of endorphins into our bodily system. And one of the releases of chemicals triggering good feelings is at the moment of triumph, when we learn something or master a task. And so in games, fun arises out of the quest for mastery upon intermittent introductions to challenges requiring skill growth. One of my favorite puzzle games is Cut the Rope. That is, if you excuse the ads and the prompts. The game is fairly simple. You complete the levels by feeding the candies to this small and cute monster, Om Nom, by cutting the ropes attached to them. The early puzzles, no doubt, are easier to pass, and the perfect 3-star solution prompts upon you rather quickly without much friction or thought. Before you get too ahead of yourself though and lose interest in the game, the design smartly introduces sporadic instances of challenge where your first thought of solution isn't always the one that will get you ahead right away. The challenge then requires you to try again, to learn from the last try and do it differently or even better the next time. Semyon Voinov, the creative director of the studio behind the game, explained how they specifically designed the level right before the last one in each stage to be the hardest one. Or if you let me elaborate, the one that would challenge the player's hitherto mastered skill and urge them to change their play pattern and go through a learning curve to deliver that burst of pleasure upon mastery and to try to keep them hungry for more. So to begin, introduce an obstacle. After the introduction of a competitive yet fun challenge, what should follow is the player's failure. No matter how undesired a failed attempt may be, a challenge that requires the growth of the player's skill or the development of a better strategy will almost always result in a failed attempt for the lack of it in the first place. A failed attempt is pretty much all the time despised, but pay attention a little more and you will find failing is only seldom a mock and more than often a lesson, teaching why what you tried won't work or how to do the level better or even successfully in the next try. Like how I bumped into the wall because of sticking so close to the turn and failing the race, but remembering to leave a little more room in the final attempt and making it through. Still a bad drift, I know. In the puzzles of Cut the Rope, failing to sequence the perfect solution on your first attempt is often actually a necessary step to find the perfect solution in the first place. In fact, if you want to teach the players a skill or something that should stick with them, then for once let them fail for the lack of it. For the learnings from failure stick, because the lessons the failing attempts teach are more experiential than theoretical. Not only that, basing on the observation of my own experiences, or maybe just on the way we humans are programmed, I believe our tendency to want something increases even more when we fail to acquire it a few times already. Those repeated failures before a final win deepen our desire and keep building up the anticipation for that final satisfaction. And that is why I state failing a few times is crucial for a win to be more satisfying. And who better to prove this point than the Valkyries of God of War? The Valkyries in God of War are fierce and ruthless warriors caged away inside the hidden chambers of Odin. They are optional challenges and not a part of the game's main storyline. In fact, it is suggested to face the Valkyries after having completed the main storyline because of their insane brutality and intense difficulty. There are 9 Valkyries in all, and each has a different and unique style of fight. From summoning joggers to rapidly hurling at you to even raining balls of fire. One may not speak at all, and the other will send chills down your spine with her battle cries. So defeating one doesn't help you defeat another any sooner. With each Valkyrie possessing a unique style of approach, it all cuts down to the player's ability to learn and adapt accordingly, which I hardly believe a player to attain in their very first attempt. Because challenging the Valkyries is to learn to cope with repeatedly failing attempts. Each attempt teaching you to be a little better and every time further intensifying your want to finally triumph that merciless servant of Odin. This experience of repeated failure and unmet satisfaction is what builds up the lingering anticipation until the player finally picks up on the bird's flow and masters the unforgiving challenge by dancing along the Valkyrie's unique pattern of fight, and finally obliterates the obstacle by surviving longer than the bird and ripping the wings off of her. This satisfaction in the death of the Valkyrie erupts out of the player's ever-deepening longing for mastery and triumph, along with the outlet of the accumulated frustration from consecutive failed attempts. The lack of this learning curve is what makes a direct get-in, get-out win not as fulfilling. So, introduce a challenge, then let the player fail.
Did I ever tell you what the definition of insanity is? Insanity is doing the exact same fucking thing over and over again, expecting shit to change. That is crazy.
Contrary to Vasa's definition, with repetition, things do change. In Cut the Rope, the puzzles require a specific order or correct timing to be solved. Missing the order or the right opportunity to cut the rope renders the level unbeatable, if you excuse the power-ups, of course. It is only by a retry that you get a re-attempt at the challenge and figure out the right solution by learning from your past mistakes and repeating this act of trial and error until success or until you give up trying. So multiple retries definitely help you get better by letting you explore alternate paths and actions. But an aspect to further understand is why does the player want or have to retry, and if a certain reason can add to that satisfaction of the final success. Every attempt of a retrial is always backed by a motivation of the player, and motivations themselves are majorly classified under two categories: intrinsic and extrinsic. The motivations that arise from non-personal or external incentives of the player are extrinsic. Extrinsically motivated tasks are pursued by the player for gain, benefit, or requirement, and not always because the task itself amuses them. For example, the aforementioned campaign mission of Heat had a similar requirement laid for level completion. The requirement was to finish first. The completion of the race is not enough, neither is settling for a position less than the first place. The game just won't let you proceed if you do not finish first, and the player will have to keep retrying until the requirement is met. The motivations that arise from within the player are intrinsic. They encourage the player to do tasks for personal satisfaction and enjoyment rather than for non-personal or external incentives. For example, the stars spread out in the levels of Cut the Rope can be collected as you maneuver the candy to Om Nom. To collect them or not, though, is completely on the player. Although a small amount of stars are required to unlock further stages. Instead of a restrictive find the solution or no progress approach, the levels are more open, letting you pass even if you collect no stars at all. But even when I could just move on to the next level and not have to spend extra thought or time trying to score the perfect 3 stars, I found myself always retrying almost all the levels that I couldn't get the perfect score for. The game didn't force me to do this. Instead, this was a personal goal I set onto myself for my personal satisfaction. So my extra effort and determination to do better was fueled by my intrinsic motivation to find the perfect 3-star solution and bag a perfect score. This is what the developers of the game referred to as a self-manageable difficulty, where the design lets the player decide how difficult they want their game to be, letting them choose to collect all the stars or just complete the levels. Semyon then states how this approach delivers more satisfaction to the players because they set the goals for themselves and then achieve it. So if you can curate a gameplay experience where the attempt of a retry is backed by the player's intrinsic motivations, you have more chances of delivering a much satisfactory experience. Just like Don't Starve received much better results after removing goals set by the game and letting the players incline more towards their intrinsic calls. So repeated attempts help the players better understand the obstacle, try alternate actions and improve until enough to master the challenge. This phase could be rendered more fun and meaningful if the motive behind the player's reattempts are more personal than extrinsic. This stage marks the complete formation of the obstacle, failure, and retry loop. What you want to do next is keep the players inside this loop, but only for a while. The designer's goal here should be to make the players undergo a learning curve to build or gain the skill or strategy necessary to beat the challenge. But the goal never is to trap the players inside the loop. If the players get trapped inside this loop of forever repeating trial and failure and can never make out of it because the implementation of a learning curve and improvement is absent, too difficult, or just broken, the player will grow tired and move on, abandoning the game. For this to not happen, the very first step is to make sure the obstacles introduced are masterable to begin with. A challenge that just cannot be mastered is not only frustrating but turns the game boring. Further, the obstacle's learning curve, no matter how brief or long that may be, should be more encouraging and hopeful than punishing. That is, of course, until you are from software or just enjoy sadistic designs. Restricting further progress in the game or punishing the players too harshly on failing can backfire too. Should the player not be able to or might not want to master the obstacle in the first place. It always helps to remember this state the loop puts the players in should always mean to provide an environment for learning and growth by challenging the player's hitherto skill, but never a place only to torment the player. Because you only do this right when the player does make it out of the loop. This stage of gained mastery followed by satisfaction marks the end of the obstacle, failure, and retry loop upon the player's final escape out of it. Finishing first, bagging all the 3 stars, triumphing the Valkyrie, or beating the invincible boss finally acknowledge the player's increased skill and intellectuality. This part is when the players experience the flow of the feel-good chemicals in their body, apart from which nothing much really happens in this stage. The drama, the energy are all built up and exist inside the loop, from the player discovering a challenge to obliterating it. A good design with well-balanced difficulty will always see its players go through and make out of this loop with improved skill and a fun and emotion-fueled experience. For after all, interest is piqued by fun experiences, and fun in games arises out of challenge and mastery. And if a game is
not fun, why bother?
Well, that pretty much wraps it up. To summarize, satisfying wins are ones that are not so directly attainable and require the player's skill growth before mastery. To curate a similar experience, begin by introducing a challenge, then let the players fail. The players should then retry and improve until skilled enough to beat the challenge and break the obstacle, failure, and retry loop.